You're listening to Andy Dean.
Welcome on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Show is gigantic. A good feeling about this one. Miranda, you with us?
I'm here. Huge show.
So we're going to do things a little bit different today because we got to mix it up. So we're going to begin with bizarre news because Miranda promised.
It's super hot.
Okay.
Just trust.
So you have a special docket of bizarre news. So we're going to kick off the show with that. And we've got a great story about Mia Farrow, the Chevron Corporation, and the country of Ecuador.
Ooh, amazing hypocrisy alert. So good.
So that's going to be in bizarre news. You don't want to miss that. And then after that, we've got TV Judge Alex. So he was on the Fox network during daytime for 9 years with his big television judge show. He's going to be in studio. He's going to tell us about how his life went from he was a police officer, then an attorney, then he was a judge in a very famous case that was made into a movie, the Mark Wahlberg movie Pain and Gain, where a bunch of bodybuilders in Miami went on a murdering spree.
Wait, he was a lawyer for that?
He was the judge in the case.
Get out.
He's going to tell us the story being the judge in that case. It was turned into a Michael Bay movie. And the story of, did he star in the movie as himself, or did something happen where he didn't star in the movie as himself? So he's about to walk in studio in a little bit after Bizarre News, and he'll tell us all that coming up. And then we also have a legal segment where Judge Alex is going to turn into our legal correspondent. And then after that, we have Dr. Mitch, who will be calling in with our medical report. We'll have the latest on the Ebola virus. And then a new study out today, a 20-year study on the effects of marijuana. Does it make you lazy and stupid, and does it really cause the munchies? And then we'll also talk about a woman in the medical segment who used a potato as birth control.
It's my favorite story. And I'm not the woman. Don't point at me like I did this.
Right.
But it's my favorite story of all time.
Okay. So we're going to do Bizarre News, TV Judge Alex in studio, then Dr. Mitch. So let's kick it off. Miranda, what's on the Bizarre News docket today?
Selbyville, Delaware, a 4-year-old girl was trying to share what she thought was candy with some of her classmates at daycare. It's like pre-kindergarten daycare. And for some reason, the mom had switched out her backpacks. A pet went to the bathroom on her regular backpack. So the mom gave her a different thing to take her stuff to school. So when she got to school, she found all these little bags of candy. So she started passing them out to the friends. And luckily, there was someone who works at a daycare who was actually paying attention. And they noticed all these little kids holding these white baggies with white powder inside. So they called the cops. Cops did a test. It's heroin.
Did any of the kids do the heroin?
No, none of the kids actually opened up the heroin, but it was 249 packets of heroin.
Little baggies?
3.735 grams. I don't
What's
have
the
a street value.
value?
I don't have one. But, yeah.
All right.
Isn't that amazing? And then the mom, of course, got arrested.
She blamed it on the 4-year-old.
She's like, that's her heroin. I don't know.
My daughter's out of control. All right, what else in Bizarre News?
Duluth, Georgia. 2 guys robbed a bunch of hardware stores. They stole weed whackers, chainsaws, and when the officers gave chase, these guys had a really unusual way they were going to repel the cops. I watched the video of this. My explanation will not do it justice. Please go find this video on the internet. These guys stole $19,000 in weed whackers and chainsaws. It's a lot of gear from 2, hardware-style stores. It's 1:30 in the morning. So the cops are like, okay, these stores aren't even open. What are these guys doing? They hit the lights. They start going on a chase. One of the guys crawls over the back seat into the back hatchback part of this car and flip open the back door, and they start throwing active live chainsaws at the police car.
Whoa.
One of them did end up making contact, doing more than $3,000 in damage to the cruiser. And about 3 minutes of chasing, and then the guys stop and run out, and they haven't caught them yet. But when they got to the abandoned car, they still had more chainsaws. They had 9 weed eaters and 2 more chainsaws. They threw 3 total chainsaws and a weed whacker at the cops.
It's like a horror movie.
Isn't that incredible?
And there's video of flying chainsaws?
There's videos of the chainsaws coming out.
Oh, because the dashboard cam.
Right, exactly. So you're watching the dashboard
I want to see
cam.
it.
Yeah, it's great.
So what do you type in? Duluth, Georgia? How do you find this?
Yeah, Duluth, Georgia, chainsaws of cops.
Chainsaw video?
Yeah, chainsaws, cops, chase, whatever. High-speed chase. It's great.
All right. And they got the guys that did?
No, they did not catch the guys because they got out and ran, and they haven't caught the guys. As of the time that I printed this article, maybe by the time someone listens to this, they may have caught them already.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. What else in bizarre news?
Weymouth Bay in England. Have you ever seen the Seinfeld where Elaine is hosting like a marathon runner and the alarm doesn't wake up?
Yes,
and all
he's
that?
the African runner.
Right.
And the question with the alarm is it the
AM
snooze
or
button,
PM.
AM, PM, and it turns out to be the volume.
The volume.
The
knob.
volume.
I never checked the volume. Mm-hmm. Well, this guy spent a year training for a triathlon. He had over a couple $1,000s worth of donations come in. He's fundraising for whatever they're doing this triathlon for in England. And he was supposed to swim 2.5 miles, cycle for 112 miles, and then run a full marathon. So he set his alarm for 3 a.m. so he'd have enough time to drive to where he has to go and get ready and start. Well, he hit the snooze button and didn't wake up until 6 a.m., 3 hours later, which is way too late. He never would have made it. So he said that the problem was he didn't switch on the snooze, they call it the snooze facility. He didn't have a backup alarm essentially set. So when he hit snooze, it shut off, and it didn't go back on again. So he told his wife, he said he just stared at the phone in his hand, and he couldn't even believe it.
And then in the Seinfeld episode, the reason why the alarm, because there's AM, PM is why some alarms fail.
Right.
Snooze button, obviously, the volume issue.
Right. So,
and then didn't the power go out?
Well, because he was staying with Elaine. Jerry didn't trust Elaine because she screwed up setting the timer for the microwave. She set it for 3 minutes, and she wanted to set it for 30 seconds.
Got it.
She was like, you're going to stay with me, John Paul. And then Kramer had bought a hot tub that blew
and the power goes
the power
out.
in the building because of the heater.
Brilliant.
And so he was...
Jean Paul, right.
Jean Paul.
And then doesn't he makes it to the race?
He gets on the race, and he's doing really well, but Kramer's so cold from falling asleep in the hot tub that had gone cold, he's drinking coffee. John Paul knows Kramer, so grabs the cup out of his hand, thinking he's handing him water, and he dumps hot coffee all
Kramer's
over
on the
himself.
side of the street cheering him on, drinking coffee. John Paul grabs it thinking it's water and burns his face.
Burns his face.
Right. Clever.
Well, I guess I hit the snooze.
So good.
Okay.
So anyway, this guy was super embarrassed. He had to go on his Facebook page and admit to everyone that he's a total idiot and offered everyone refunds of their donations. And nobody actually took him up on it. The following weekend, he did it all by himself. He went and did the triathlon and ended up making actually even more money in fundraised donations. So good for him.
Yeah. I guess a marathon, in theory, if you don't in competition, you could do that whenever you want.
Anytime.
Right. If you want to run 26 miles and swim and all that,
ahead.
just do it.
I'm not going to, but you enjoy. Yeah.
Right.
He did a triathlon. Good for him. I'm not going to do it.
Something I have no desire to do.
He spent like a whole year training and getting ready for it. It's just...
Seems exhausting.
Yeah. So exhausting, but like, I wouldn't say it's a waste of time because like it's exercising, but there's something kind of like, I don't know, inherently narcissistic about doing it. I don't know. It just seems it's a weird thing to me.
I just like I like the idea of running towards something or away from something like a soccer ball or tennis or a football.
Like if he
the
got
idea
to
of
keep
running
all that
just
money.
to run 26 miles just to run it. I don't know.
Running isn't fun. Like
No.
our ancestors did it
mind-numbing.
for survival. It's not like enjoyment. And so yeah, if he made like $5,000 in donations for whatever, I just would want to keep it for myself, and that would be motivating.
All right, what else in bizarre news?
Honolulu, Hawaii. This is an incredible rescue. This 8-year-old boy fell 6 stories down a trash chute at this high-rise apartment building. And some bystanders actually ended up helping him out, which is incredible. They don't know this kid. They just happen to live in the same building as him. So apparently this trash chute had been cited by the fire department in the past because it didn't latch correctly. Something was wrong with it. And this kid was walking by, and they say that he fell in. I don't buy that. My trash chute in my building is like 5 feet off the ground. So there's no way a kid's just going to fall in. He climbed in, but he fell down.
How old was the kid?
8 years old.
Oh, it's pretty big.
Yeah. He's not like a little baby. So he fell in, and he got stuck on the second level because there was a blockage in the trash chute. It was jammed. So he got stuck right there, and he's just kind of like holding himself up and just screaming and crying until these 2 guys that hear him break the emergency hose glass and then roll it out and then drop it down the trash chute and have him hold on to it, and they pull him out.
Well, he's lucky that there wasn't trash piled on top of him. Like,
Right.
if it was my trash, you're throwing Corona glass bottles down there, and then it breaks a kid in half. So he got lucky.
He got lucky, and no one threw any trash in after he already
hit
had
him in the
fallen
head,
in.
yeah.
And knocked him down some more. So, yeah, these two guys, they said they were able to get him out, and he did just fine, and he's expected to be okay. He had some cuts and stuff, but nothing too crazy.
What else in bizarre news?
Detroit, Michigan. A guy is having a lot of trouble trying to sell his home, and he's decided to advertise that he's willing to trade it for an iPhone 6 or a 32 gigabyte iPad.
What about an iPhone 6 Plus? He just wants a regular iPhone 6?
He wants a new iPhone, so maybe he would take the 6.
So he doesn't even want the bigger one.
No, he wants the iPhone 6. I don't like the bigger one.
The bigger one's too big.
It's hideously big.
It's like having a computer in your pocket.
Right, and it's like, as a man, what are your thoughts about these phones being so huge?
I barely have enough room in the crotch area to begin with what I'm dealing with down there.
Okay.
So I can't fit a gigantic phone
we
down
have
there
a
because there's
serious
so
conversation. I swear to you, like, if the phones keep getting this big, guys are going to start carrying purses, or we're going to see a resurgence of like 1994 style baggy jeans.
I think at some point
Or
in the
cargo
near
shorts.
future, there's going to be a backlash to large phones because remember, phones started out gigantic.
well, like on Zoolander, and they had the tiny phone,
Well, Gordon Gekko in Wall Street had this gigantic cell phone when he
the
was
Zach Morris phone. Yeah.
Right, the big Zach Morris phone, exactly. And then phones, it was cool as they got smaller and smaller. It was like, whoa, the StarTAC or the Motorola Razr, look how small that
I
is.
had a Razr, it was awesome.
Like small was in, which for sound engineer Dave, small being in is like a big deal.
Yeah, he loved it.
And then, right, he
The
was
golden age for
right, it
him,
was a big
yeah.
deal for him. And then, like, big became in because of the smartphone.
Screens, and we want to
right.
watch TV on our phones and YouTube and ConnectPal videos.
There's a cool, I think there's going to be a backlash. Have you seen the Jitterbug phone?
Yeah, but that's
It's
for like old people.
senior citizens.
Yeah.
Like
or little kids.
I want that next because I just can't take all the gadgets
You're
and the
just done.
constant.
You're done with texting and
Yeah.
emails and all of it.
There's going to be a.
You just want a direct line to
I
your
just
mom
want
and Uber.
Jitterbug with just one application of Snapchat, and that's it. Okay, where are we on this? Oh, so you're trading a
So he
home in
wants to
Detroit.
trade it for that.
See, I'd rather have an iPhone than a home in Detroit
He had it listed for $3,000,
because you don't have to pay property tax on your iPhone.
and that's the kicker in the story. So he had it listed for $3,000, 1.5 bath, and he owes more than $6,000 in property taxes, which you would also inherit should you do
The Wall Street Journal ran an awesome story last week on like gigantic mansions you can buy in really dumpy cities for like less than $100,000.
Really?
Like you can buy like a 7-bedroom mansion in Toledo, Ohio. That was owned by like one of the heads of General Motors or something.
Right. Because
nobody wants to live in Toledo.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It makes me depressed because I see that, and then it's like, oh, you want to buy property in Los Angeles? It's $600,000 for a condo.
Right. But there was one cool city because I was looking in this Wall Street Journal report of, is there a city, because all I care about is warm weather. I go, is there a city that's semi-warm
Right.
where you can get a gigantic home for like $100,000? Uh-huh. And there was an answer. There was one city on the list.
Where?
The rest of them were horribly cold. But the one city was Brunswick, Georgia. And I looked it up. Brunswick, Georgia.
Does that have anything to do with bowling?
Oh, like
Brunswick?
I don't know. I don't know. But I looked it up, and it's like near the ocean, like right on the ocean. It's like
Get out of town.
Yeah, it's near Sea Island, Georgia. It's near Jacksonville, so it's like the southern coastal part of Georgia.
Wow.
So you have like you're close to Jacksonville, so you have like an airport, and it's coastal, which means you can like be near the ocean. And the property values, I was like, wait, you get this gigantic home in Brunswick, Georgia, for like low 6 figures. You can live in a 5-bedroom mansion. I'm like, well, what the hell am I doing? I'm going to move to Brunswick, Georgia. It looked like a nice little quaint town.
All right.
Like it looked cool.
You're going to go be the mayor?
Maybe. Like it'd be great.
Yeah, that's your life's dream.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like
Be
the
a
key
small
to
town-
life
be a
now,
small
I just
town
want to be
mayor.
a medium-sized fish in a small pond. That's all I want.
You're done chasing.
I'm just no, yeah,
You're
that
over it.
ended clearly when my radio career exploded. Okay, so what else in bizarre news?
Mia Farrow. Whoa. Okay, that was honestly like a
What
full
was
minute
it?
ago. Jitterbug.
Oh,
That was a story.
I just heard a loud noise in my ear. I know we have to do that for video but can you delete that from the podcast? Okay, maybe. Or just keep it in. Keep going.
Are we
Yeah,
keep
no,
going?
keep going. Just
Okay.
relax.
Did you
You're
hear
all
this
good.
Mia Farrow thing with Mia Farrow about the Chevron stuff? Do you want to
Yes,
explain
I want
it?
to set this up.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this was a New York Post reveal, because I want to give credit when somebody does enterprising reporting. So there's been this big lawsuit down in Ecuador where Chevron, was exploring oil exploration. And Chevron had been down in Ecuador for decades, doing what they do. They find oil, which is a nice thing, and they provide jobs in Ecuador. And then the Ecuadorian government got taken over by a socialist communist thug named Rafael Correa. Correa. Right, you know it because you speak Tijuana.
Yeah, that's racist.
Yeah. So the point is this. The government changed hands, and when the government changes hands, the socialists blame all of the country's problems on the oil companies that were actually providing real jobs and engineering and all of that. And so they say to Chevron, hey, you're polluting the rainforest. We want you to pay a $9 billion fine. And Chevron's like, wait, we signed a deal with the old government. We were providing jobs. We were donating a lot of the money to indigenous communities. We were doing a valuable service. And now this new government comes in and hits us with a $9 billion bill for saying that we spilled oil in the rainforest, which is factually incorrect. And so the government, the socialist evil government of Ecuador, was essentially going after Chevron. And Chevron said, hey, we didn't do anything wrong here. Well, let's go to court. And so what Ecuador did, in conjunction with a bunch of lawyers in New York City, and all these lawyers in New York, by the way, are going to go to prison, as they should. They all belong in federal prison for violating the RICO statutes. What happened is a bunch of fancy New York lawyers said, oh, wait, we can work with the Ecuadorian government, who are a bunch of socialists. We can sue Chevron and scare Chevron into settling. Instead of getting $9 billion out of Chevron, maybe they'll settle for like $300 million, and the lawyers can take their big fee. The Ecuadorian government can pocket the rest, and then they can siphon it off to Switzerland. So a bunch of New York lawyers got in cahoots with the Ecuadorian government and a bunch of Ecuadorian judges, and they literally created a fiction of Chevron spilling oil in the rainforest, which was factually untrue. And to help sell this story, they got one of these Hollywood celebrities. Apparently Mia Farrow is a celebrity.
Yeah.
She apparently, right. She's married
People know who she is.
Right, Woody Allen and all that. Mia Farrow,
Ronan's
she sucks.
mom.
Right, Ronan Farrow, the loser on MSNBC. That's
How has his show not been canceled?
It's just terrible
so
on
bad.
MSNBC.
Anyway, continue.
Right, so Mia Farrow goes down to Ecuador, and there's a very famous photo of her sticking her hand in the Ecuadorian rainforest, holding it up, and it's covered in oil.
She plunged it into the dirt,
right,
and pulled it out.
And it was a Hollywood thing. Like, they obviously pre-set it. So she plunges her hand into the rainforest floor and brings up oil. All the TV camera crews are there. Everybody from the Ecuadorian government saying, oh, look what Chevron has done to us. And Mia Farrow says Chevron Corporation is evil. The people of Ecuador deserve better. That's why Chevron should have to pay a $9 billion fine. And, of course, the New York lawyers who set all this up to sue Chevron are laughing, saying, oh, isn't this great? This is wonderful. Mia Farrow is now pressuring Chevron and bringing global attention to damage Chevron's reputation. So Mia Farrow sticks her hand in the rainforest, holds it up. It's covered in oil. And these are pictures that are printed all around the globe to shame the Chevron Corporation and celebrate the evil Ecuadorian socialists. It turns out that after the New York Post investigated, Mia Farrow was paid $188,000 to go down there, stick her hand in a place where she knew there was oil for this photo op, and the whole thing was concocted by the socialists in Ecuador and the trial lawyers in New York to sue Chevron into submission for crimes that they did not commit. Now, Mia Farrow has been exposed, and hopefully she will go to prison, because I know that these lawyers in New York who were trying to extort Chevron, they're all going to go to jail. Once again, racketeering, extortion, working with socialists to sue Chevron. So this story, I think, should be on the front page. It's an amazing story of Hollywood hypocrisy with Mia Farrow meeting government corruption, meeting dirtbag trial lawyers, all to try to hamstring and extort an honest American company. What an amazing story. I hope I did it justice.
You did, 100%. Okay. Way better than I could have.
Okay,
and not only that, but all I want to add to it, like, you're right, $188,000, which she admitted on Twitter she was paid for that. But then she later deleted the tweets.
Right. So that's Mia Farrow, which begs the question, right? She said that Woody Allen did all these terrible things.
Maybe he did.
Maybe he did.
She's a liar.
She's
a little scandalous.
All right. What else in bizarre news?
Deltona, Florida.
Is it Daytona or it's actually Deltona?
Deltona.
Oh.
I think it's Pasco County?
I don't know.
Where's Dave? He knows. He knows about Florida better than you.
He's eating Chipotle.
Sounds about right. So a mother and son meth-making team ended up getting arrested because they butt-dialed 911 while they were getting ready to cook their latest batch of meth in the shed in the backyard of their Florida home. So there was an emergency dispatcher who got the call. And now with, phones that are screen touch phones, if you hit the button, like just the main button, emergency call pops up. And if you hold it down for long enough, it'll just make the call for you. So I'm assuming that that's what happened because the dispatcher got the call and listened as two people were talking about drugs. And eventually the dispatch woman on the other line heard a bubbling sound like something was cooking, and they were able to keep the call connected for a half hour while they traced it and got deputies to the area. So cops showed up. They found a shed full of meth-making materials, and as soon as they opened the doors, all this smoke billowed out like in a scary movie, like a haunted house. So they found all kinds of things, an active meth lab, coffee filters, butane torches, batteries, drain openers, tubing, needles, lithium strips, lighter fluid, plastic bags, tons of bottles with white substances. 32-year-old and his mother, 55, were arrested with another person. They were all arrested on charges of manufacturing and possession with intent to distribute meth.
Do we have a picture?
I have photos.
Excellent.
Mother and son.
Well, I'll tell you, she looks a lot older than, what did you say, 55?
55.
She looks 95.
They should put that on there.
This is the oldest 55-year-old woman I've ever seen.
They need to put that, that's their Christmas card photo.
By the way, his mugshot, he's trying to look cool in it. It's pretty funny.
He's got a Bieber smug.
He's got a smug eye. Here, I'm holding it up as evidence.
Exhibit A.
All right. What else in bizarre news?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've got these. I always find these because I know how much you love them. A robbery suspect was beaten up because the convenience store clerk that he was trying to rob was a former Golden Gloves boxing champion.
Oh, God, I love these stories.
I know. So the 45-year-old...
It really is. You know why? Because it's karma.
Instant
karma. That's what it is. Instant karma. Nice.
There's nothing better than that.
You're good today.
So this 45-year-old guy walks into the convenience store. He's carrying a gun, and the clerk, this is him being interviewed by the news, he says he just got slammed. The robber was still in the hospital 4 days later.
I love that.
From getting the crap kicked out of him. So
is there a video of the convenience store clerk beating him senselessly?
Maybe. I don't know. I didn't find any, but I didn't look that hard. But I'm sure that CCTV footage exists.
How great would that be? The guy pulls a gun and the clerk just beats him.
Roundhouse kicks
him. Right?
I got to look for it now. So, yeah, this guy, he was the Western Pennsylvania Golden Glove champion only 2 years ago. It's not like he did this in his prime and now he's older. No, this is current. And he still boxes all the time. The only injury the clerk sustained was when the robber bit him. But that's not going to affect his training.
And do we know how, before he beat him, with his Golden Gloves, how did he get the gun out of it? We don't know how he got the gun out.
I don't know any of that. But, yeah, they're just saying he got the crap kicked out of him. So
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, what else in bizarre news?
Salt Lake City, Utah. A 32-year-old guy was in a Mexican restaurant, and it's about 2:45 in the morning. I guess they stay open late in Utah. And he sees a girl that he likes, so he goes up to one of the servers and says, "Hey, can I borrow a pen? I want to get this girl's number." The server refuses.
But when you get girls' phone numbers these days...
You put it in your phone.
You put it in your phone.
That's what I would think.
Like the idea of writing down a phone number from a girl, that's a little awkward.
The only thing I could think of is maybe his phone was dead because it's almost 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay,
I was just trying to connect some dots. That's the only thing I can think of. But we don't know that much. Anyway, he asked the server guy for a pen, and he refuses to give this guy his pen. And they get into an argument to the point where he pulls a knife and stabs the server in the leg and then again in the stomach, ribs area. So the guy who was the stabbing guy ran away. He was later caught by the police, and he confessed to stabbing him, and he did not get the girl's number.
Oh, you have
I have a picture of the stabber.
He's weird.
He looks like a creep. He kind of looks like a sloth.
He looks like Matt Lauer. It's pathetic. Do you use Tinder?
No, I'm not single.
Oh.
Why would I use Tinder?
It's just a fascinating invention.
Do you use it?
Yeah, people know. Everybody knows what that is, right? It's an app where
I think so. Yeah,
it's like a free dating. You
like a dating
they're pictures of girls, and if you like them, you click yes. If you don't,
but
no.
the aggregate's linked with your Facebook, isn't it? So it's you kind of find people who you may
it's
have
people
in
your area. So if both of you think if I like a girl and she likes me, then it links you two up.
Right.
It's a pretty good idea. Why don't we think of that?
I don't know. We always think of stuff after it's already been thought of.
All right, what else in bizarre news?
Toledo, Ohio. This guy came over and had a booty call with his regular booty call gal.
Mm-hmm.
And
You have a picture of her?
No, I don't. I have a picture. I had a picture of the guy, but I deleted it because there's no point. But no picture of the lady. So after they were finished copulating, she goes to get in the shower, and he hears a baby crying. So he goes to check it out. What's the deal with this baby crying for the mother? So he takes the baby downstairs to get a drink of water, and then they come back up. And I don't know. This is where the story just takes a turn, and it just doesn't make any sense because the mom comes out of the shower and sees that her baby has a big lump on its face after the guy, because I don't want to call it the boyfriend. It's not. It's the booty call guy, punches the baby in the face with a closed fist to get the baby to stop crying. I've only ever seen people cry more after they get punched in the face.
So he makes love to the mom, then punches the baby.
That's
a romantic man.
That's a good guy.
He's an old-fashioned type.
They probably met on Tinder.
Sounds like Ike Turner.
So, they will not be staying together. And he got arrested. And what's really funny is, according to the police report, she wanted to stress they are sexual partners only. Mm-hmm. They're not friends. They're not boyfriend, girlfriend. That's not the baby's daddy. He just punches the baby.
Was this Ray Rice again? Or no?
Yeah.
Where is Ray Rice?
They were in the elevator. Ray Rice
we should do a Where Are They Now?
He's appealing. Isn't he appealing? That's the last I heard.
Johnny Cochran's defending him.
Oh, wow. That's a good get if he could get Johnny Cochran.
All right, what else in bizarre news?
Harrogate, England, a 23-year-old guy woke up with an erection that refused to go down. So this isn't a case of Viagra overdosing or Cialis. It is priapism, but he didn't take anything to get
he just had a 17-hour erection?
He woke up with his morning friend, and it just never went away. He went to work. He works at a hotel, and around lunchtime, it still hadn't gone down. So he took an ice bath. He went for a jog, and that didn't make it work. But it's like, couldn't he...
Like, go to your grandmother's house. Just the smell.
Go to grandma's house, or like go into a bathroom and just like take care of yourself, and maybe wouldn't that make it go away? Oh,
you're saying to make it go away?
Like maybe. I don't have one, so I don't know how this equipment works exactly. But he says,
I bet he tried that.
You think so? It's not that's not on the list of things he tried right here. But they said after 8 hours, and it was still up. He talked to his roommate, who fell over laughing, and then took him to the hospital. He was diagnosed with priapism, just like you said, and they had to do a drain. 2 pints of blood were drained from his member.
That's a lot of blood.
That still didn't work. They had to give him 24 rounds of medication that were supposed to maybe
this
blood.
Guy should be a porn star.
Maybe a blood thinner. Well, I'll show you what his face looks like, and he will not be a porn star.
Well, Ron Jeremy's a porn star, and he's hideous.
That's very rare. That's why there's only one example of...
I don't even think the idea of like a porn star exists anymore because it's all free amateur stuff. So it's like the idea of like a star in pornography, it's about as uncommon as like making it in the radio business. It just doesn't happen.
I was listening to this girl on Howard Stern like maybe a month ago, and she does porn, and she's like 23 years old, so it's not like she's been around a long time, and she makes a lot of money still doing it.
But probably niche stuff. Like, is she like, does she have some sort of like, does she have a club foot or something?
I think she did like triple or quadruple anal.
Oh, are we going to keep this in the podcast?
I'm just telling you, that's what she did.
We have families listening. Okay, let's just...
Whatever, it's bizarre news, Andy. I can't say that, but I can say 17-hour erection.
All right.
Anyway, here's a picture of what he looks like. And it eventually did go down, and he's fine.
Oh, yeah, he looks like a tool.
He's hideous.
Trying to think who he looks like. Like the BTK killer or something.
His son. Yeah, he's a creep.
Okay, what else in bizarre news?
I got 2 more. Brisbane, Australia. This has been everywhere. Police believe that this Australian chef murdered his girlfriend, chopped up her body, and then cooked her on his stove.
And he's a chef?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, they were both chefs. That's how they met each other.
Oh.
They were both chefs.
What did he prepare with her, like, as a dish?
They said...
She became what?
Fava beans.
Lasagna?
They said it was just some kind of a stew that he had going.
Oh, meat stew.
Yeah, a meat stew.
A human stew.
Cops showed up. He's 28 years old, and they said that in the hallway, because they came because neighbors were complaining it's just a bad smell. They said it smelled like off dog food. Like, there's just something weird going on in there. So, cops walked in. They saw him leap out of his balcony and then gave chase. And they ultimately found his body in a trash can. He slit his own throat.
What?
Which is insane.
He slit his own throat?
Isn't that insane?
That guy should have joined ISIS.
He slit his own throat. And I'm going to show you a picture of him and the girlfriend in a second. Totally normal-looking people. You never would have suspected.
This was just so scary.
So, I know, because you never know. And this guy could have been...
And Australians are usually pretty laid-back people.
Could have been your neighbor. Maybe he's not from Australia. Maybe they just live there. But, yeah, he said that cops say that in the apartment they found some parts of the girl's dismembered body in a pot on the stove, in the stew, others in trash cans, and then people, like neighbors, say they just moved in.
Did they say, like, what else was in the stew, like vegetables?
No, I don't have that. Maybe that'll come
like
out.
A heavy meat base or bouillon base?
It's very meaty. They had her body chunks in there. And
I ate his liver with some fava beans.
Nice.
A bottle of Chianti. So, yeah, they say that residents in the complex say they just moved in recently, but they had been arguing loudly a week before this whole discovery. The girl is from Indonesia, and they met while they were both working as chefs on a cruise ship. And apparently this is very...
So then it was like an Asian-type stew then?
Well, and they said that she was a high-end sex worker charging $500 an hour for her services. I don't know how true all that is. That's just like an aside. But here is some photos of the dead now couple.
She kind of looks like a tranny.
Yeah, that's another rumor that's going around. I didn't want to report it because I just don't know. But they say that... And there's other pictures, not that, where she does look more tranny-like. So... But he looks totally normal, right? But
he kind of looks like our computer programmer, Slava, who works on ConnectPal.
He actually really does.
Yeah, he looks like one of our software developers.
Like if Slava had a beard.
Yeah. But she does look like a tranny.
She's pretty, though. And they said she was post-op. Which means...
All right.
Are you not going to show the camera?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Jeez.
That's why I kept the pictures in.
Okay. Exhibit something.
C, D.
Go ahead.
Toms River, New Jersey. So there's a youth football coach. It's like Pee Wee football. And the coach decides he's going to cancel the entire season because these boys just have bad attitudes. They're sore losers and even worse winners, and they're jerks, and he does not want to deal with them. He's going to teach these kids a lesson, no football for the season. When he's making the announcement to all the boys and their parents, one of the dads goes full water boy and just charges across the field and headbutts and tackles this coach.
That's funny.
To the ground.
In front of everybody?
In front of everybody.
That's great.
So there's going to be video that comes out of this. You know someone had their phone out.
That's priceless video.
It has to be. So the dad is saying...
When parents attack coaches or refs, it really is. It's just...
An angel gets its wings.
Right. It's just like, thank you.
It's the best thing ever. And so the dad who did the tackling is saying that he was provoked and had to defend himself because of the provocation. But witnesses say that the dad was the complete aggressor in the entire thing because obviously you got to wonder, where did these kids get their bad attitudes from? Idiot parents.
Is that it?
That's it.
That's a wrap?
I'm done. I got no more.
All right. Well, Miranda, excellent work.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
See you then.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Andy Dean.
And joining us now in studio, a very special guest coming to us from Miami, Florida, but he's all the way out here in Los Angeles. Everybody knows the great Judge Alex Ferrer, host of the nationally syndicated court show Judge Alex, 9 seasons with 20th Television and the Fox Network, over 1,300 episodes. And Judge Alex, we're going to do the legal segment with the great judge today. But he's also a former police officer from Miami, Florida. And then while he was a police officer, he put himself through law school, and then he became a judge. And then, of course, he ended up with the Judge Alex television show. And it's a very cool life story because you were born in Havana, Cuba. You came over, and it really is kind of the rags to riches American dream. And I think that represents the best of what our country stands for. So, Judge Alex, it's an honor to have you, sir.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on, Andy.
Please. It's honors all on this side. So, before we get to the legal stories of the day, and there are 3 cases I want to discuss. One about one of the Boston bomber's friends who helped him destroy evidence because his defense is a defense I've never heard of as far as a strategy. I want to pick your brain on that. Then we'll talk about the Ebola case and how that relates to the law. And could the patient 0 in Dallas, Texas, be facing criminal charges if he survives? And then lastly, we'll talk about Ferguson, Missouri, and your constitutional right to protest and what police officers can and cannot do when you're protesting on a sidewalk. But before we get to the legal segment, I'd like to ask you just about your personal story. So how do you go from being a police officer to becoming an attorney to then becoming a television judge? Walk us through kind of what happened here.
All right. I started as a police officer because I really didn't want to be a pilot as a career. I thought I wanted to be a pilot. It was an interesting career choice because I flew a lot on vacations with my family because my mother worked for the airlines. And back then the benefits were if you worked for any airline, you got to fly free on every airline. So we traveled a lot. Every single time I flew on an airplane, I got airsick. Every time. I mean, one time I actually got sick when the plane was taxiing down the runway. I mean, it hadn't even taken off. So to think that you would want to be a pilot considering that one major issue is insane. But I did. So I got my pilot's license when I was 18 years old, and it kind of cured me of the air sickness. But I also realized that I didn't want to be flying all over the place all the time, and I thought it was a great hobby. And my next attraction really was police work. I had worked at a gas station since I was 15 years old, pumping gas and then going to high school. And by the time I was 17, I actually was managing the gas station. And during that time, I met a lot of police officers who would come in there to fill up their vehicles and stuff, and we would talk, and I'd ride with them sometimes. And my grandfather had been a well-respected police officer in Cuba, and I'd seen how people looked up to him and things like that. So it appealed to me. And so I became a police officer. At the time I became a cop in Miami, I was the youngest cop in Miami. I was 19 years old. I like to tell people this because it's still so funny to me, but I was so young I couldn't buy my own gun or bullets. Like the police department gives you a gun, but you have to buy an off-duty weapon. I had to take my mom with me to the gun shop and say, Mom, that's the gun I want. Buy that one for me, will you, Mom? Huh?
And this was when you were a cop in Miami. This was like the heyday of cocaine, right? So you must have seen some crazy cool stuff.
This was the cocaine cowboy days.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. And then I worked my way through undergrad and law school. I worked full-time at night, and I went to law school full-time during the day. And I took my books in the police car, and when I wasn't on a call, I studied. And the chief knew about it, and he let me. He said, you know what, if I were you, I would be focusing on law school too. So when I graduated as a lawyer, I volunteered at his department as a reserve officer for free to kind of pay him back. And I thought that I wanted to be a police officer my whole life. I loved it, and I still do. I still miss it. But my parents gave me the best advice I think parents can give their child. And they said, listen, you want to be a cop, that's great. It's a noble profession. Just don't quit studying, because you may change your mind. And if you change your mind, you'll have options if you have continued studying. You won't if you quit. And if you don't change your mind, the education is just going to help you rise through the department. So it seemed logical, and I did it. And, of course, by the time I finished law school, even though I still love police work, I was ready to try something new. And so I became a lawyer, a litigator, and I handled a lot of cases that were rather large. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I wasn't getting the personal satisfaction out of litigation, out of being a lawyer, that I did out of being a cop. Mm-hmm. You know, as a cop, I always felt like I was the one wearing the white hat. I felt good about it. As a lawyer, I always felt like I was somebody's hired gun. Whether they were right or they were wrong, I was going to fight their fight. And that just didn't sit well with me.
And did you miss the action of being a cop, having a gun on you, that type of stuff?
Yes,
yeah.
I definitely did.
Okay.
And I wanted to find something that would give me the personal gratification, and I started thinking about it, and I said, I'll bet being a judge is very gratifying. I mean, you're always trying to do the right thing. So I decided to run for judge. In Florida, they're elected. Unless you get to the appeals court, those are appointed. But I ran against two very tough opponents, a judge who'd been on the bench for many, many years, so he was an incumbent, and a lawyer who'd been practicing since I was eight years old. And here I was 34, 33 when I started running, and I was running for circuit judge, which is the higher level of the two courts in Florida. Uh-huh. I think the youngest judge after me was 41. So I was way under the age that they expected. Mm-hmm. And so my opponents didn't really give me much of a thought. They figured, well, okay, this guy's just in the race, but it's really between us two. And I ended up beating them both, the typical spread on a judicial election in Florida is maybe 2,000-3,000 votes, because a lot of people don't vote for judges; they don't know who to vote for.
Right.
So you could win by 2,000-3,000. I've seen where they've won by 200-300 votes.
And were you able on the ballot? Sorry to interrupt there, but can you say you're a police officer on the ballot? Because I know,
No.
you can't.
No, it just says your name.
It just says your name.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can advertise that or whatever.
Okay.
So as I said, you can win by 200-300 votes sometimes, but usually they're a couple thousand. And I beat them by 80,000 votes. I mean, I just slaughtered them, and I became the youngest circuit judge. I'd been the youngest cop, and now I was the youngest circuit judge in Miami. And I did that for 10 years. I was in the criminal division for 9 of the 10 years. In family division for 1 year. I started teaching other judges, which I do to this very day. Last week I was teaching Florida judges, and then the time came after about 10 years that I was ready for another change. It seems like every 10 years I'm ready for something, and so I put my name in for the appeals court, and it's a very difficult position. A lot of competition, a lot of partners of law firms and other judges apply. So there were 60 high-quality applicants that I had to contend with, and then they put you in front of a commission, I should call them, and these 9 people pepper you with questions. They go around the table, and you fill out these massive applications, and at the end of it, they give 3 names to the governor. And out of those 60 applicants, there were 3 vacancies. I was the only one that came out of the committee with 9 unanimous votes. So I'm heading into the governor's interview. It looks really good because it was Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush was very much pro-law enforcement, and I'm a former cop. He's very much he was, as a governor, very much into promoting minorities. He put more Hispanics, blacks, and women on the Florida bench than any governor ever has and probably ever will. And I'm, of course, Cuban. And and I'd been on the bench for 10 years, so he knew what I was going to be like as a judge. And then here I was the only one out of 60 applicants who got 9 unanimous votes. So it looked really good. And 2 weeks before the interview, I withdrew my name because television called and said we want to do a TV show, just out of the blue. Now, I'd been handling a lot of high-profile cases that have been covered in the media a lot, like the movie Pain and Gain with Mark Wahlberg and The Rock. That was my trial.
Okay, and for a second, I want to discuss that because people who haven't seen the movie Pain and Gain, that movie is unbelievable because it was the first time ever where a murder victim was identified by her breast implant.
That's true.
The Scantron scan bar on her breast implant actually led to her identification. And it's a story of 3 bodybuilders who, could you kind of give us a taste of it? It is so unbelievable. Like when you watch the movie, you think this cannot be true, and every part of it's true. And this was your case, correct?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
I was
Just
a
give
judge
us this.
on that
This
case.
is amazing.
In fact, I was supposed to play myself in the movie, but it conflicted with my schedule, which is something I'm still kicking myself for.
Well, yeah, this is a Michael Bay movie.
Michael Bay asked me to play the judge.
And wait, hold on. Why didn't you do that?
I would have. I absolutely would have. But the casting agent dropped the ball. They didn't call me until the day before the filming. They realized that they hadn't called the judge. And so they called me and they said, Michael Bay would like you to play the judge. And I knew my agent had been reaching out to them saying, hey, by the way, the judge is available.
Right.
But I hadn't heard anything. I knew they were filming, so I thought it was just not going to happen.
What else could be more important than being the judge? Like, what else did you do that day?
Yeah, this is about the only thing that would have kept me from doing that. When they called me, I said, absolutely, I'm happy to do it. They said, great, we film tomorrow. And I said, are you kidding me? How are you going to give me 24 hours notice? And they said, we're sorry, we dropped the ball.
Yeah.
They were supposed to call me months before, and they thought they didn't.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they realized it. And I said, I'm boarding a flight. I was hopping on a plane to go to Boston I was the keynote graduation speaker at a graduation for a school in Boston. And there's no way. I'd gotten emails from the dean of the school saying the students are so thrilled that you're going to be their keynote speaker. And my friends are all telling me, "Are you out of your mind? You got to bail on them."
I know. That's why I would have bailed. Yeah.
There's no way I was going to bail.
You're
on
a better
them.
person.
There's
than
no
me.
way. I mean, I can't think of anything worse than standing them up at their graduation.
You're a good guy. You're a much better man than me. Okay, wait. So
I'm still licking that wound, by the way.
So who ended up playing you in the movie, the Michael Bay movie? Who played you?
Well, that was the thing. When I went to see the movie, and I went to the Hollywood premiere and the after party. I talked to Michael Bay about it, and I laughed with him about the mess up and how I didn't get to to be in the movie and stuff. And I met Mark Wahlberg and all the actors in it. And the exciting thing, I took my kids, and they were thrilled to meet the actors.
And it was The Rock. The Rock was
The Rock wasn't there because he had injured himself.
Oh, okay.
He went back to try wrestling and injured himself. But and what my kids were really thrilled about was not just meeting, Mark Wahlberg and Tony Shalhoub and Ed Harris and all these great actors, Anthony Mackie, but how thrilled they were to meet the real judge in the case. So that really, really impressed my kids. But
that's funny.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Well,
but I spoke to Michael Bay's publicist, and she said Michael was really torn up that you couldn't play yourself in the movie. And I said, well, not as much as I was, I assure you. And I said, but I saw the movie, and I saw the judge was only on television, on the screen, not television, but on the screen for 8-10 seconds. So I don't feel so bad. And she said, oh yeah, well, Michael had a lot of other courtroom scenes that he cut out because you couldn't do it. And I was like, she could have just lied to me and said, yeah, that's fine.
And for people who haven't seen the movie, and you presided over this case, tell us, so there are 3 bodybuilders, and it's the craziest murder story I've ever heard. Give us a taste of that.
The movie, of course, has to make what was a 4.5-month trial, the longest criminal prosecution in Miami's history, fit in 2 hours. So they do take some shortcuts along the way. So there are some differences from the real case, but in general, the crazy things you see in the movie, almost all of them do happen in some way, shape, or form. But basically, it was these 2 bodybuilders and a whole cast of bodybuilder friends and owner of the gym and all these people who decide to kidnap this guy and extort $100,000 from him. And they figure he's not going to go to the police because he's involved in Medicare fraud, according to what they were told. And so they figure they'll shake him down.
Right, smart. Yeah.
Right. So the comedy of errors in their attempts to kidnap this guy, because they're just meatheads. They're true steroid-taking meatheads, apparently, and the attempts they make to kidnap him are ridiculous. They do, like in the movie, dress up like ninjas to try to kidnap him. They do just ridiculous stuff. They turn their car off, waiting for him to come by, and they're gonna crank it up and crash into him and go, "Oh my God, it's horrible," and then tase him and throw him in a van and kidnap him that way. When the wonderful ninja trick didn't work. But they turn the car off, and as he's driving down the street, they're cranking it, and it's going and he just drives right by, and it was one error after another.
And they buried this woman, or they put her in a shallow pond.
They kidnap him. They keep him for like a month, and they try to kill him.
Right.
And the guy lives.
They try to run him over.
No, they run him over. They lit his car on fire with him inside, and then when the guy got out of the car, they ran him over twice.
And he survived.
And he still survived.
Right.
And so, but then you move on from him because he, disappears on them. I mean, there's so many parts of the story. They're looking for him in the hospital to smother him with a pillow, and he's on an air ambulance flight to New York. If you want to read the story, there's a great book called Pain and Gain, written by Pete Collins. I think there are 2 of them, same name, but the one by Pete Collins. He was a journalist who spent every day in my courtroom, and he has just great background facts on what was going on outside the courtroom and all this stuff. And so then they start looking for another victim because they've moved into victim number 1's house. They're living his life.
Right.
They've changed a pool boy contract to their name. They're driving his cars and wearing his jewelry and dating a bunch of strippers, throwing his money around.
Right.
And then they find out he's alive. And his lawyer says, let's get all your money back, because they took him for like $1 million something. That's why they decided to kill him, because he might not have gone to cops for $100,000, but when you take everything he's got,
right, he's got nothing to lose.
Right.
Yeah.
So then they basically approach these guys and say, hey, he gets all his money back, and we don't go to the cops. He gets anything less, and we go to the cops. Well, they've used up a lot of his money, so now they're looking for victims number 2, and the story is just unbelievable. It's dark because it's a horrible story, but it's funny in a dark way because of their
and they find this. They killed another man and woman, and the woman that they killed, I believe she found at the bottom of a swamp, and they only could identify her from her breasts. Correct?
Yeah. What they did was, and this is where it gets kind of gruesome. In the movie, they portray the first victim as a real sleazebag, which he wasn't a real sleazebag. He might have been involved in something that was not quite legal, actually pretty illegal, Medicare fraud.
Do you ever fear for your safety as a judge dealing with all these kind of near-do-wells?
No. There's only, and all the time as a police officer, as a judge, the number of times I've been threatened, I don't give it a second thought. There's only one guy who worries me. And, I'll tell you that story some other time.
And you conceal carry? You always have a gun on you in Florida?
I can. I don't always, but, if he ever gets out, I'll start carrying it again.
Okay. And so, sorry to interrupt, but back to the woman who was identified by her breasts.
Yes. So what happened was she was the girlfriend of this very wealthy young guy. He was 32. She was 23. Both, by all measures, the movie made them out to be like a porn king and his porn star girlfriend. They were nothing like that. Okay. I mean, everybody liked them. They're very nice people, and I can see why the families would be upset that the movie portrayed them that way. They tried to do the same thing to them, except clearly they weren't going to let them go from day one. They didn't even hide their identity like they did with the first victim, because it didn't matter if they saw their face. They were going to kill that couple. But, of course, they botched it all up, and they killed the guy before they ever got a dime from him, and then they accidentally killed the girl. And so they had 2 dead bodies and no money. And so they went to dispose of the bodies, and the stuff that happened in the movie with like the chainsaw and taking it back to Home Depot and all that really did happen. I don't want to tell all the stuff because then your audience might not have seen it. So I don't want to give all of it away. But there are a lot of things in the movie that you shake your head and go, that they're not that dumb. Yes, they actually are.
Got it.
And so they dismembered the bodies, and they dumped the torsos in one part of the county and the heads, hands, feet, identifiable parts in the other parts of the county. And DNA was kind of in its infancy. So really, we didn't have the ability that we have now. So they were able to identify her from the serial number that is contained on every breast implant.
And that was the first known case where that was ever done.
Yes. And then,
by the way, I remember growing up. I was a teenager at the time in Florida because I grew up pretty close to you in South Florida.
Yeah,
and that was a very well known, famous. It was an amazing story.
And I handled also another famous case, which was the one with that girl Amy Billiggs, who was hitchhiking in Coconut Grove when she was 17, and she just disappeared off the face of the earth. Nobody ever saw her again. And then her mother started getting calls from a guy named Hank, who said, I have your daughter, and I'm using her as a sex slave, and I'm going to sell her to these slave traders, and, I'm teaching her this and that, and just sick. The calls continued every week, every other week, never longer than 3 months without a call. And sometimes they would be several times in a week. The calls continued for 21 years. Now, imagine what you were doing 21 years ago.
Wow.
And imagine getting phone calls from then until now saying, we have your daughter and all this stuff. And then they finally caught the guy, and it turned out he was a United States Customs agent, decorated agent and everything, no prior problems, nothing. He apparently had not kidnapped and murdered her. He just had this sick obsession with making these type of phone calls. Wow. It was a bizarre case. It's been the subject of book and documentaries and things like that. But a lot of those cases got a lot of high publicity, which led to people seeing me on television trying cases, and led to the idea that I could.
And then you become, and that's what I want to discuss next. So you become a television judge, 20th television. Everybody's seen this on the Fox Network, over 1,300 episodes. So tell us, migrating into the world of television justice. You would sometimes shoot like 9 or 10 episodes a day. Like, How does that whole world even work? Like, tell us about that.
It's pretty grueling.
Okay.
It's pretty grueling. It's much harder. Well, the way I do it is much harder. The way I did it, because the show just ended this year, but there's some interest in possibly bringing it back. The way I did it is much harder than the way the other TV judges do it. I did it according to the law where the case originated, because when they approached me, they said, look, we're going to approach people who have cases in courthouses all over the country, and we're going to give them the opportunity to have you decide their case. We'll fly them over here, present their case, you rule, and we can do their case next week, as opposed to them sitting for a year in that courthouse. So I thought, well, it's not fair the way other judges do it. Like, so the other judges on television use what's called a general fairness principle. They just do whatever they think is right.
It's like an arbitration thing?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
they're all arbitration. Arbitration is basically private judging.
Okay.
It's the only way that we have jurisdiction over the entire country. So they basically sign a contract saying, I'm their arbitrator, or Judge Judy's their arbitrator.
Got it.
Or the People's Court Judge, Marilyn Milian, who's a friend of mine, is their arbitrator. So,
And do the contestants, or not contestants, wrong word, like the litigants, do they get paid to appear as like contestants in the TV justice system? Like, what's their incentive to do it?
there's a couple of incentives.
Okay.
The first one is a lot of them want their 15 minutes of fame.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them do. The second one is a lot of them don't necessarily trust or are afraid of the judicial system. But if they've seen me on TV and they trust me, they might feel more comfortable bringing their case to me. The third one is they get a free trip out of it. If you're living in, I don't know, Iowa, Kentucky,
Right.
whatever state, and you haven't been to L.A. or to New York, you get a free trip out here. They put you up in a hotel. And so a lot of people, it's like, hey, why not? We'll
Right.
go. Now, we typically wouldn't pay anybody a appearance fee. I think Judy pays everybody $500 or something like that, because otherwise they won't come, because she can be vicious.
Right.
We would pay them if we really didn't want to lose the case, like it was a really good case, and the people were like, I don't know, I don't want to come. Well, then we'll give them like $150, and we're paying their airfare and stuff,
Gotcha.
and they'll have $150 each to do that. But other than that, we typically didn't pay an appearance fee. Now, as I was saying, the other judges do a general fairness principle, where they just do what they think is right. And I felt like, well, if somebody's in Georgia in a courtroom and they're going to come in front of me, they shouldn't get a different result in front of me than they would have in Georgia, because then they're being screwed. They
Right.
would have gotten maybe a ruling in their favor in Georgia, and I feel different about it, and I rule against them. So I decided I was going to apply the law where the case originated, which I think is the right way to do it, but it's so much more work. Because to give as an example, like you brought up, I do 9 to 10 shows a day. So I'll wake up 6 a.m., go and start filming shows. Now, these are real trials. So
And you're filming, where's the location filming? You're in Texas,
Well,
or where do you shoot
I
them
was
at?
originally in Texas for 5 years because my kids were teenagers,
Okay.
young teens, and I didn't want to be all the way across the country. I live
Got
in
it.
Miami, so we agreed on Texas. And
Okay.
then after 5 years, from 6 on, we moved it to L.A. because my kids were older then.
Got it. Okay.
So what happens is I get up and I start taping, and these are real cases. They're real litigants, and they are entitled to present their case. So I can't say, oh, well, we have the 30 minutes that we needed. We're done. So if the case lasts 45 or an hour and 15, that's how long it lasts. So the day can be rather long because you'll tape, film a case. I'll rule. I'll go back to my chambers, get ready for the next case. They have to get the litigants in. They have to film the intro. Everything takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll do all this all day long. I'll get back to my hotel 6:30, 7 at night. And then that's a point where other judges are just going out to dinner, relaxing and stuff, because they don't really have to prepare for anything. They're just kind of calling it however they want.
Right.
I am reading and researching, the research, because I have an assistant who's a lawyer, and I would give him, the week before I get the complaint and answer of the case, and I would call him up and say, hey, I need you to find out what the dog bite statute is in Illinois and whether Chicago's Harris County has a leash law or whatever
Cool.
county it is. And then I have all that. So when I go on, because I know it's a dog bite case, when I go on, I know what the law says about it has to be on a leash. I know what it says, whether it's a one-bite rule state or whether it's like California, where if your dog bites somebody, too bad, you're on the hook. It's strict liability. Doesn't matter if you were negligent. So that those vary from state to state. Mm-hmm. So I'm preparing for the 9 to 10 cases for the next day. So then I go to bed around 1 in the morning, and I'm up at 6 again. And I have to be on, and I have to be awake and alert, and hopefully funny and witty, and their story changes. My legal analysis has to change with it. So after 3 days of that, my brain is pretty fried. So I would do 3 days of 9 to 10 shows.
Okay, and then so 3 days. Let's say you shoot 30 shows.
I go back home and come back again in maybe a week or two and do another.
Got it. And so you could shoot 180 episodes, which is a full season, in what, a 6-week period type?
Yeah, about 6 weeks I could do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, 6 tape weeks, but it might be a week or two in between, so it comes out to maybe 3 months, 3 to 4 months.
Got it. And then they edit and stagger it throughout the whole 9-month TV season.
Yes.
Okay. And then I heard reports that Judge Judy makes $45 million a year. Did you make more or less than that?
I made slightly less than that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a lot less than that.
Got it.
As she makes, I think, maybe $50 million.
Okay. And it's so lucrative. lucrative just because her time slots, what they lead into local news? Is that why she's so?
I mean, she gets those time slots because of the ratings she gets.
Okay.
So she pulls in an audience. She gets a rating that is much higher than anybody else's. There's nobody near her in the rating. She gets a higher rating than I think anybody else on television, and she gets a higher salary than anyone else on television. I think the reason her salary is so high is that when they cut the deal with her, they gave her a piece of the show, and they didn't have any idea she'd be that successful. I think it was maybe it was a way to keep her salary down, saying like, oh, we'll just give this older judge from New York a ownership piece of the show. It won't be worth much.
Right.
And then it turned out to be hugely successful, and she's part owner of it. So, but she has a very high rating, and that's what.
But do you ever look at it like Judge Judy? It's like she has this kind of wacky, funny personality, but she doesn't put the work in that you do. Are you ever like, that kind of, she's just playing herself and she gets this whole, private jet thing, or you don't think of it like that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, not at all. She has earned everything she gets. Okay. I mean, she's got a personality and, she's a live wire. And
that's a nice answer. You're a nice guy.
And that's her style, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just her style. That's the way she is. There's nothing wrong with the way they do it. I just chose to do it differently. Maybe I'm the stupid one for doing it differently. They have it easier doing it that way. And it works for her.
Gotcha. Cool. So before we get in, we're going to jump right into our 3 legal cases, like topical, what's in the day's news. But last thing, as far as television world, are you thinking like maybe you do primetime next, or what's your thing? Like, what about a judge show like at night, like on a cable channel or something?
It's so funny. I was just talking to somebody about a primetime judge show yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm open to anything that comes along. I've had some interesting suggestions, and I've been here taking meetings in L.A. about different interesting ideas. I'm really open to anything. I'd love to also do scripted. I'd love to play a detective on like Law and Order. I mean, because that'd take me back to my cop days.
That would be cool.
Yeah. So I would love to do anything. I would like to have played myself in Pain and Gain.
Right.
I'm just open to a lot of ideas.
Yeah, because I think that with all these horrible shows that NBC runs at night, there needs to be, I don't know, like a Sharia law court or something that the audience can get behind.
There you go. Right.
Yeah.
We haven't had, I can't remember the last time we've had televised stonings.
Right.
So that might
missing.
Be the way to go.
Right. Or chopping hands off, that type of thing. Right. That's if you want ratings, you got to do. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of Muslim radicals and jihadists, our first story, this is a nice segue, is about the Boston bomber, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, we remember, had 3 friends in college that helped destroy the evidence. They destroyed his laptop. They destroyed empty fireworks shells. And a lot of the evidence that tied Dzhokhar Tsarnaev to the Boston Marathon bombing, in which he murdered 3 people, well, then also the MIT cop, and one of those victims was an 8-year-old boy. So these were very, very sick individuals, the Tsarnaev brothers. The oldest brother, of course, is rotting in hell. Dzhokhar has a first-class ticket there, but he's going to have to be in jail for the rest of his life, but hopefully he'll get the death penalty. What I wanted to ask you about, one of these friends, one of these college friends who helped hide the evidence, he lied to the FBI about why he hid the evidence, and now he's come back with a defense that I've never heard of before, and you being a cop, lawyer, and judge, I wanted to ask you, will this hold water? So what this college kid is saying is that he couldn't have lied to the FBI about hiding the evidence of the Boston Marathon bombing because he had smoked marijuana all day, he was highly intoxicated, and he couldn't have told the truth about anything because he was so stoned. And it's probably true because he was a pathetic pothead, but could that hold up in court? How does that work?
Okay, there are crimes that require a particular state of mind, and there are crimes that don't, or a particular knowledge, and there are crimes that don't. For example, first-degree murder requires you to kill somebody with the intent to kill them, with a premeditated intent. To use, for example, premeditated first-degree murder. So you have to have that specific intent. If you don't have that specific intent, then that element of the crime is missing. And that was a hurdle for many, many years in a lot of jurisdictions. If the person was so drunk that they didn't really realize what they were doing, it was hard to prove that element. They've passed some laws that kind of eliminate that, but that's just to tell you that there are certain elements to a crime. Pieces to the crime are like ingredients in a cake. Mm-hmm. They all have to be there to get the cake. So conceivably, if somebody was so stoned that they didn't know what they were doing, and knowledge is a requirement, like knowing that what you're saying is not true, then if the jury believed it, you could defeat the prosecution's case if they believe you were so stoned that you didn't know what the truth was. I see a couple hurdles. One is the jury typically doesn't believe that. Okay, they think it's too convenient an excuse to say, "Wow, I was too drunk to really know what was going on, or that I was lying, or whatever." And two, there's two times to look at. One is the time that you supposedly hid all the evidence. You're saying you were so stoned that you didn't realize what you were doing or what was going on. You didn't know. But then there was the time you talked to the cops. Were you so stoned on that occasion that you didn't know what you were saying to them? Or were you clear-headed and remembered, hey, wait a minute, that day's a blur to me because you told them something totally different. You told them, no, I wasn't there. I was over here and I didn't do that. So there are a lot of problems with a defense like this, and not the least of which is when you're dealing with such a horrific crime and being an accessory to it, the jury doesn't have any sympathy for you. So there are circumstances where an argument like that could get some traction, but they're few and far between, and I don't see this having a snowball's chance in hell.
Okay, I agree with you. And also, it's like he was so high and so stoned out of his mind that he says he doesn't know what he was doing, yet he actively knew exactly what evidence to remove from a crime scene, and he saw his friend on TV and then immediately acted. So he can't, he's playing dumb in one area but not in the other.
Right, and it's very similar to the people who claim insanity, but after they committed the crime, they took steps to hide the evidence and to conceal themselves. And they say, well, he didn't know the difference between right and wrong. Well, sure he did. He took steps to conceal the fact that he was involved in the crime. That shows he knew it was wrong. So it's very similar to that.
Okay. Next up, I'd like to get to two more cases. And this has to do with the Patient Zero, Dallas, Texas, the Ebola case. And this individual, if he had known, and there are varying reports as to how much he may have known. This is Thomas Eric Duncan we're talking about, of getting the Ebola virus in Liberia and then coming. He was not symptomatic when he boarded the flight from Monrovia to Brussels, and then Brussels to Washington, D.C., and then Washington, D.C. to Dallas. So September 20th, he lands in Dallas. He shows no symptoms. September 24th, he shows symptoms, goes to a hospital. He gets dismissed from the hospital with antibiotics. Even though the hospital knew he was in West Africa, he comes back 2 days later, and they're like, oh, wait, maybe we should test him for Ebola, and the test comes back positive. What I wanted to ask you, though, is that legally, if he knew that, look, he was in West Africa, he starts having a high fever, and he comes into contact with, they say, over 50 people after he showed symptoms, could he be criminally responsible if he infects another individual? And I wanted to ask you, is there precedent for this? Because if you know that you have AIDS and you engage in sex with somebody unprotected and transmit the virus, that is aggravated assault. So how do you think the court will treat this individual, Thomas Eric Duncan? If he lives, will this become a potential federal crime for transmitting the virus?
I think it's a very difficult case. I mean, there is a difference between the AIDS virus transmittal during sex and the transmittal of Ebola, which he conceivably may not have even known he had it. The strength that he has on his side is the hospital released him with antibiotics. So his lawyer's going to get up there and say, if doctors who are experts didn't know he had Ebola, how could he, this guy from West Africa, know he had Ebola? Mm-hmm. How could it be apparent to him and not to these trained physicians who know to look for this stuff? So that's big on his side. As far as criminal charges are concerned, there are several types. There's the intentional ones, like when somebody knowingly has sex and transmit AIDS. When AIDS was not curable and was a virtual death sentence, they used to be charged with attempted murder or sometimes murder because of they knowingly caused it to death. And is that a state or federal crime? How does state crime.
Okay.
So now, typically. So now there are also charges like manslaughter that if the person dies from Ebola, that they could come in and say, look, he was grossly negligent. He was culpably negligent, which is higher than just negligence that, you're involved in a car accident. It's gross negligence because he knew he had this disease and he put himself in close proximities with people who were going to catch it. That would be more likely if they were going to bring criminal charges. But again, Ebola is not transferred through the air. It's transferred by body fluids, and he wasn't exhibiting any symptoms, so it's not like he expected to be sneezing all over everybody. Mm-hmm. So there are a variety of reasons why I think it would be difficult to criminally charge him in the case.
Okay, interesting. And our final story for you, and this is good to get your perspective, once again, because you were on the streets as a police officer, and then, you being a judge. And this is out of Ferguson, Missouri, so there's been a federal court ruling against the police officers in Ferguson, and this has to do with the protests regarding Mike Brown and the shooting of Mike Brown by an officer. And then protests break out, and a lot of these protesters were clogging up the sidewalks and not letting people pass through. And so the cops said to them, and they're on record saying, hey, you have to keep moving. If you don't keep moving on these sidewalks and you keep blocking the area, we're going to arrest you. And now a federal court has come down and said that these law enforcement officers were violating the law and violating constitutional rights by telling people that they had to keep moving when they were just protesting in a nonviolent fashion. So I want to ask you about that, but even before that, because I want to get your perspective on the Mike Brown thing. Maybe I'm crazy, but this just seemed to be such a clear issue of this guy Mike Brown is on surveillance video robbing a store and then pushing around a shopkeeper like a bully, let's be honest, like a piece of garbage. And then he beats up this cop. We know the cop has injuries to his face. And then the cop shoots him. Were you just surprised at, the whole racial conflagration? Is that just a product of, a race hustling industry meeting a slow news cycle with liberal 24/7 news outlets? What is this a byproduct of?
I'd say yes and no. I mean, I think that there are people out there who are very well known that they will go anywhere that there is a white-black issue and yell, racism or whatever, without any proof that it is racism. Now, I don't really have a problem with them asking themselves and wondering, is this racism? You had the Zimmerman case out of Florida with Trayvon Martin. I don't have any problem at all with when a young 17-year-old African-American boy gets shot by a whatever 30-something or whatever he was, white male or Hispanic male, asking, the police should be asking as one of the questions, is this racially motivated? That's fine. Once you don't find evidence that it's racially motivated, or until you do find evidence that it's racially motivated, it should not be claimed to be racism. But we do have people who make a living out of rabble-rousing, out of, getting everybody angry, and that's how they...
Sharpton, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
People like that. So there is that component to it, okay? The flip side of it is, I'm not African-American, and I don't know what it's like to grow up African-American in the United States. I suspect that if I experienced growing up every time I walked into a department store, the store security following me around and looking at me to see what I was going to steal, or people, seeing me and crossing to the other side of the road, all because of the way I look, it would probably make me suspect that any time something happens like that, it must be racially motivated. So to me, it's a matter of perspective. The people who have dealt with police officers who have been either aggressive with them, and by the way, you won't find a bigger fan of police than me. I am a huge fan of police officers, having been a cop myself, and knowing that it's one of those careers that you don't get paid nearly what you should for what you give to the community. That and teachers, are my heroes. But there are bad cops. I've worked with some of them, It's just like anything else. There are bad judges and there are bad lawyers and there are bad everything.
So we were in Miami police, and you don't have to,
Well, I wasn't on the city of Miami. I was with the Gables.
Okay, so in South Florida, you're
right.
Police. When you say there were, bad cops, was it one on the force, or is it, 1 out of 10? How many guys are you hey, this guy, there's something off about this guy?
Well, when I say bad cops, there are cops who didn't work with me, but who I knew, like the ones that were in, the cause of the McDuffie riots in Miami, the first major riots we had.
Was it the Overtown?
Yeah, that was the one where they chased this guy on a motorcycle. He was going at a high rate of speed, and they were chasing him and all over the place, and then he finally crashed, and when he got off the motorcycle after he crashed, he took a karate stance and took them on.
Right.
And so they fought him, and they knocked him down. And then that's where it should have stopped, but it didn't. They straddled him and they pummeled him with those big Kel lights that we used to carry back then, which were steel pipes, basically, and killed him. So, they should have been prosecuted, and they were, but the jury acquitted them, and that led to the riots. My feeling is, look, the cops have it hard. They do. But we know that when we take the job on, and that's one of the reasons I admire police officers so much. That doesn't give you license to become a murderer or anything like that. You can use as much force as is reasonably necessary. If they felt like they were in danger with this guy who was taking a karate stance and trying to beat them to death, and at that point, if it was legitimate fear and they had no other recourse, they could have killed him. But once he was on the ground and immobile, and they had him, they beat him to death. I mean, I say they, but it was particularly one officer. So there are bad cops. And if you're in a part of the community where you deal with cops like this all the time, that's going to be your impression of police officers. So when you see a white police officer shoot a unarmed black teen, your take on it is going to be, he didn't have to kill him. This is just another white cop killing a black teen. And that's because that's your perspective. Those of us who haven't lived in that light, those of us who see police officers differently, who haven't had negative experiences except maybe the guy wrote me a ticket, are not going to see it that way. But, there are a lot of degrees of good and bad cops. You could have cops who may be rude to you, but would never injure you on purpose, would never falsely arrest you. They might have had a bad day. It'd be like a rude teacher or something, okay? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make them that level of bad. They're just, and then you've got like the ones who beat that guy to death, or some people say up here in L.A., I didn't, follow it that closely, but we heard about it all over the country, the Rodney King case, So, you have degrees of it. And the person who, their particular perspective is what's going to govern the way they view the case. Now, what happened? I don't know. I did hear the same thing you heard, that the police officer had a fractured orbit of his eye. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's true or not, because when people start saying things around the time of the incident, you don't know how much of it is just BS and it's getting repeated and repeated to the point that people think it's certainty, or how much of it is actually true. You, on the one hand, have a variety of people who said he had his hands up and was surrendering. You also have some people who said he kept coming at the officer and kept coming at the officer when the officer told him to stop. You have the what we've heard is that the guy reached into the car and was trying to take the cop's gun away from him, and they fired a gun in the car.
Wouldn't you side more with the police officer in the sense that just like half an hour earlier, this is a guy who robbed a convenience shop, and then he bullied? See, I hate more than anything in life, and I'll be honest, even more than murderers, I hate bullies. And what he was, Mike Brown, is he was a bully who, this tiny shopkeeper said, hey, don't steal from me. I'm trying to make a living. And then Mike Brown on videotape, you can see what he's doing. He's pushing this guy. No question. He's a total prick.
Right. Absolutely. I don't disagree with you, but we don't execute them for that. I mean, my point is, yes, I agree with you on that, and that shows his character, at least in that video. Maybe that's the way he is all the time. But that being said, for that, he should go to jail. I've locked up plenty of people for strong-arm robbery all the time, okay? And he should go to jail. But you don't shoot him dead for that. And I don't know that this officer shot him dead for that. Part of the scenario, it can go a couple of ways. One is he was, the belligerent bully that you're talking about, and, had it out with the cop and reached into the car and was fighting the cop and punched him in the eye and fractured his orbit of his eye, and then tried to get the gun away from him, and the gun fired, and then he went running down the street. And at this point, the cop has a choice. Let this guy, who was so violent that he punched a uniformed officer in the eye and tried to get his gun away from him, escape, okay? Or tell him to stop, and if he doesn't stop, shoot him. I mean, those are the options, okay?
But if you were a cop, if you're getting hit in the face, somebody's reaching for your gun, what would you do?
On the spot, I would have shot him.
Right.
On the spot.
Okay.
The question is, once he's running away, do you shoot him? Now, the police have the right to shoot a fleeing felon if the fleeing felon is a danger to either them or to the community. An argument can be made by the cop that, hey, listen, there's nobody more dangerous than somebody who would beat a police officer to get his gun and try to pull it away from him, because once he gets a gun, what's he going to do? Okay? That argument can be made. All right. Now you get the twist where people say he stopped, turned around, and raised his hands and was walking back, clearly surrendering. Okay? And I don't know what the police officer's version is. I don't know if they're going to, if he's going to say, I told him to stop, he kept coming at me, and this is a guy who, when he got close to me, tried to take my gun. and he wouldn't stop. I don't know what he's going to say. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that it doesn't look great for the cop, and it doesn't look great for the victim. I mean, they both have things that are raising questions now. But the reason is because we don't have all the facts. So the grand jury's looking at it now, and once we have all the facts, then it'll be easier to say, okay, this is a criminal event by the police officer, or this is a justifiable shooting by the police officer. But until then, we won't know.
Gotcha. And one last thing before we wrap it up, onto this federal ruling that came out in the past 24 hours.
Yeah.
And that ruling is that the police were violating rights of citizens who were protesting because they said to the citizens, hey, you can't just stand on the sidewalk, you're blocking traffic, you have to keep moving. And the federal court said, hey, police officers, you can't say that. How do you come down on this as a judge and as an officer?
As a police officer, I would come down on it a different way. One of the benefits I have is being a cop, a lawyer, and a judge. I've seen it from every position. And when I was a police officer, I totally would have been with the police officers on this. But as you get more education and you realize the effect of everything you do, you see it from different perspectives. You can't really tell peaceful protesters, you just got to keep walking, and you can't walk in a small circle. You have to keep moving down the street. They have a right to protest, and unless it's a danger, like a safety issue, for example, the United Nations, or it creates a dangerous situation to have them protesting right across the street from here, where you can go ahead and set up a reasonable protest zone for them to stand at, you really have restrictions on what you can do about people peacefully protesting. Now, when their protest starts to turn violent, you have the right to disperse them. Their right to protest ends when it starts becoming a danger to the community. But here what they were doing was apparently, they're blocking the sidewalk. Okay, so set up a area where they can stand that doesn't block the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. But to make them continue moving on, and, even reporters who were covering it were forced to continue moving on, or else they would get arrested. I think the federal court's right. I think that there's a reason why we have these constitutional limitations, and we don't always agree with them. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who don't agree with some of the rights that we give to criminal defendants. But there's a reason for them, and it's a slippery slope when you start taking away people's right to protest. Our whole country was founded on protest, as long as it's not, a danger. Now, when it becomes a danger, or you set up a zone and say the sidewalk has to be maintained open, and they don't obey that rule, then you can take action. But you can't have a flat rule that says everybody has to keep marching.
Right. Well,
I think that's right.
Yeah. Judge, I want to thank you again for coming in studio today, and want to mention a couple things of how people can find you and contact you and all of that. So at Facebook, you can go to facebook.com and just search for Judge Alex Ferrer. And then on Twitter, his handle, @Judge Alex Ferrer. So @Judge Alex Ferrer. And then is there anything else as far as like a website or upcoming appearance or anything people should know about? Or
I have a website, alexferrer.com,
okay,
which is my personal website.
Okay.
And as far as other things coming up, I mean, I'm constantly doing legal commentary on CNN and Fox.
You say you're going to be on Outnumbered on Fox News,
yeah,
surrounded by four beautiful women?
Yeah. It's not a bad
gig, my friend.
I'm going to be on Outnumbered next Friday, the 17th.
Okay. And you should get in. You have a good radio voice. You have like the radio voice I always wanted. It's very like deep and masculine. Like in my head, I look like you and have the voice you have.
Oh, that's
what I've always wanted,
Thanks.
As opposed to this mousy voice. That
Are you
God
hitting
gave
on me? I appreciate that. I was either a radio or a hypnotist. That's what I was going to go for.
Very good, very good. So the great Judge Alex Ferrer, alexferrer.com. Judge, thanks for coming in studio. That was awesome.
Thank you.
All right, great stuff.
You're listening to Andy Dean.
And joining us now, our nation's finest physician, the basis for the character played by Michael J. Fox in the movie Doc Hollywood, none other than the great Dr. Mitch. Doc, how you been?
I'm doing good. I'm doing us good because I'm joining us now, and it's great to be here as always. And we are just basically loaded with great stories tonight.
I
really
agree.
A lot.
I'm pumped for this medical content. Doc, can I read off the headlines and we'll get to them one by one?
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll talk about the two people in America with the Ebola virus. They're getting an experimental drug, but it's different from the other experimental drug given to the other Ebola patients brought to America. We'll discuss why that is. Then we'll talk about a cousin to the Ebola virus called the Marburg virus, which may be having an outbreak in a different African country. Then next up, we'll talk about the winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Science, and what did they win for? This is an amazing story about the brain's inner GPS system. Then we'll talk about a new study out about marijuana usage. This is a 20-year study on marijuana. Does it make you lazy? Does it give you the munchies? Does it make you stupid? We have the results. Then we'll talk about penis transplants. We'll talk about why if you have bad dreams, you may be developing Parkinson's disease. And then a woman who is growing potato roots outside her vagina. Doc, you ready, my friend?
Yeah, I am. Let's go for it.
Okay. We now know the two major stories in the news. The Dallas patient, patient 0, a man in America who has the Ebola virus, and then the case of the NBC photographer who got the Ebola virus in Liberia and is now back in the United States. Both of these individuals are being treated with an experimental drug. Previous reports over the weekend that the Dallas patient, he was not getting an experimental drug. It turns out that they are giving him one, and it's by a biopharmaceutical company called Chimerix. Now, this is different from the ZMapp drug that was given to the two other patients a couple weeks back. Doc, tell us why the different drug for these two patients, and are you optimistic that these two people are going to live or not?
Well, let me start off with the fact that the story of the photographer that's got the disease worries me the most because they're trying to play down Ebola's ability to be transferred from one individual to another, although there's already been a study showing it's gone from a pig to a primate, and the same study did not show it going to the human. However, we're having a hard time explaining what they keep coming out with, saying it's no more contagious than a cold, yet it's gone through 3 countries pretty significantly, number one. Number two, how did a infectious disease type of physician get it knowing the precautions? Certainly he knew how to do precautions, and now we have a photographer that got it. I mean, if you're supposed to be really bathed in these body fluids, just not making or adding up to sense. Well, this new drug by Chimerix is an oral drug, and their concern is that as the patient begins to have a significant onset of this disorder, that they cannot get a good central or line in this patient to give them the intravenous treatment that they tried before.
Okay, so, Doc, sorry to interrupt, but I just, and you said it very clearly, the two other patients that were treated weeks ago, they were given the intravenous drug ZMapp, but because the Dallas patient is so far along, it's difficult to give somebody that's that far along an intravenous drug, and so they're giving him this tablet form, which is a different drug. Is that right?
Yes, it is, and it's a different type of drug altogether as well. And in part, part of the problem, they're saying that there's no other doses of ZMapp around. So that's part of the problem as well. And they have originally started to use this drug, I guess it's pronounced brincidofovir, was used for adeno, a certain different type of virus infections in people with weakened immune systems, but they're trying it in this case. I am not overly optimistic in either of these cases. Ebola is a lethal, deadly virus, and I'm not optimistic that it won't be spread otherwise, because if it's able to be spread by body fluids, why can't it be carried on a sneeze as well as a cough?
Okay.
We're just going to have to wait out this whole story and see.
Doc, if you were president of the United States or head of the CDC, would you be stopping all people entering the United States from Western Africa, even if they're on a connection flight, and quarantining them?
To answer your question, I would have closed those flights weeks ago. How is it? I don't know if you've ever traveled outside the United States, which I have on several occasions with my animals. Dogs and cats not only are not allowed to come back to the United States if they're in certain countries, they require a vaccine list that's brand new, and they require a veterinarian to look at that animal at least somewhere between 48 and 72 hours prior to their travel. How in the world could we know that there are people coming from Liberia, Sierra Leone, a few other countries, which has this virus? Are you going to let them on a plane, a circular tin can for 9 hours, 10-hour flight, 11-hour flight, where all the air is mixed? It just doesn't make any sense. I would have closed it weeks ago.
Okay. And then, Doc, another story that's frightening, and this also out of Africa, the country of Uganda. And it appears the first confirmed case and confirmed death of a man, 30 years old, a healthcare worker who died of Marburg hemorrhagic fever. Doc, tell us, this is a cousin to the Ebola virus. Tell us how concerned we should be about this. Go ahead.
Well, Marburg virus is, again, in the same category. It is spread through the bodily fluids. It is a very dangerous virus. It belongs to a broad category of what we call hemorrhagic viruses. Lots of us know because the Caribbean has a lot of hemorrhagic viruses such as dengue fever. One of the forms of it is hemorrhagic. Basically, this is another cousin. It is like Ebola, starts like it, looks like it, so to speak, and it can do just the same damage. These viruses cause the patients to bleed internally eventually, and unfortunately they can't stop it. And the vomiting, blood, bleeding through body openings, all this type of thing, both viruses, like Ebola, have similar incubation periods, which is, by the way, another reason to close our borders to, especially anyone coming or passing through from West Africa, because 21 days, you could literally be looking around, doing great, come into the country, much like the mess up that we had in Texas, where the nurse was astute enough to pick up the problem that he came from Africa, but it didn't get transferred electronically onto the doctor's records. I think we're on the tip of an iceberg right now. I pray that it's like what they're saying, that they're going to contain this and that's it. Don't have much confidence in it, though.
All right. Doc, next up, we'll talk about the winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine, and it's for the discovery of the brain's inner GPS, and that the brain has a way, when you enter a room or when you're walking in a new city, you have some sort of spatial organization and spatial memory, an inner GPS that helps guide human beings. And it appears that this winning scientist and winning doctor was doing a test on a rat, and they realized whenever a rat was in a certain location in a maze, a certain nerve cell appeared to be active. And because of that, they've traced what in the human brain is the inner GPS that figures out mapping and location. This is pretty cool. What do you have here?
Yeah, this is cool. I mean, this is great work. We know so little of the brain. I think folks think that we're so far advanced and technologically superior in our understanding of the human body. We really know very little, and the brain is even more so. And this is a great beginning. I mean, to tell us about spatial memory and relationships where, like we remember the beginning of where we start, for example, in a maze, where we end. We have a good idea. When we go to a parking lot, we know how to get back to where we were for the most part, although most people push their button, and the car goes off, and then they find it. But for the most part, we have a part of our brain that's able to give us an idea where we are, how we got there, and how do we get back. And for these people to have been able to create or find where that happens in the brain, pretty neat stuff. Mm-hmm. Beginning of lots of other discoveries.
And, Doc, I always think of the example of the salmon, the fish, where, and I just learned this recently, that salmon, when they're born, they try to, swim out to the ocean where they hang out, and then they come back and they swim upstream to the place where they were born, and then they lay their eggs right where they were born. And scientists haven't been able to figure out how is it that salmon are able to swim hundreds of miles out to the ocean and then back hundreds of miles upriver, upstream, and then they give birth with their eggs. They lay their eggs within 5 feet from the point that they were actually born. So they return to within 5 feet of where they were born to then give birth to their future salmon eggs.
Yes.
And the ability to do that when salmon have such tiny brains, nobody can figure out if it's through scent or how is it that salmon are able to find their way hundreds of miles back to where they were born.
Yeah, pretty neat. I think it probably will relate much to this because this was done in a lower animal. And I think basically there is some spatial relationship in brains through most of the species that allow them to be able to do that. That is kind of cool, isn't it?
All right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Doc, let's talk about smoking pot.
Okay.
So a 20-year study has come out about the long-term effects of smoking pot. Let me read off some of the highlights of this study. It says 1 in 6 teenagers, so 1 in 6 teenagers who regularly smoke marijuana will become dependent. Smoking marijuana doubles your risk of developing psychotic disorders, including schizophrenia, which is getting that, to me, I would kill myself. And then let's see what else here. If you smoke pot, you double your risk of getting in a car crash right after you smoke pot. And the author of the study says that when we look at addictive drugs like heroin and cocaine, cannabis needs to be up there because of the dependence of people who seek it out. So we've heard the jokes, it makes people lazy and it gives you the munchies. But now, seeing this 20-year study that it can lead to schizophrenia, doubling your risk, and then it can impair your ability to operate a motor vehicle. Give me your thoughts on this.
Well, this is no surprise to me. I've been saying this all along, that there was a lot more to this and that they should not legalize this drug that quickly except under the use of a doctor for medical prescribed and very specific uses. We also know, which is not in this article, that there's a decrease in IQ, which is fairly significant, like 14 points for kids that use it from their youth through into their 30s. We do know that it does reduce the capability of fertility as well. And what made anyone think that this was not going to be a drug that's something people would be dependent on? And everyone tries to say, well, it's only pot. It doesn't do anything, no big deal. And it does. And the thing that worries me the most about all this is, you want to become psychotic and use this stuff, or you want to become dependent on it. That's your own, that's something you have to decide, and hopefully you can handle your kids, et cetera. But what about the fact that people are going to be driving? And you may or may not recall there was an article about 3 months ago about a Canadian mounted police officer who actually developed I call it a bedside test, but it's actually a car side test where they have a breathalyzer for alcohol. They now have a breathalyzer, which is going to be coming to this country for marijuana. In the past, it's been very hard to be able to get a good blood level by the time they get someone to the doctor or to the lab to take it. Now, right at the car side, you're going to breathe in this little thing. If you have marijuana, you're going to get really in big trouble. You get ticketed, especially if you used it within 2 hours of getting in that car.
Doc, then why do you think it is that kind of the common group think is that marijuana is this, harmless Rastafarian thing where, you just smoke it and it's a good time? When, look, if you're going to double your risk of schizophrenia, that's got to be the worst mental disease that I can think of. Why do you think that this type of important, and this is a 20-year study, that this isn't hitting home, so to speak? Like, I think you take a poll on the street and people, you say, oh, marijuana, and they're like, harmless, right?
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, the baby boomers are just coming to the point in their lives where they're realizing, we're the baby boomers are part of a drug sort of culture, the hippie culture that you were just alluding to. And the truth is that here we are, now the baby boomers are 60s, 70s, late 50s. And they were part of this culture that, hey, it was okay. It's just marijuana. It's just a plant. It's an herb. Any kind of jargon to be misleading to our intellect. But, and we never had real studies before. So it was easy just to pass on to each other that it's cool. It's okay. It's not like you're addicted. It's not like it's heroin. It's not like it's cocaine. And now, all the denial is going to come to a head because here's the study that says you shouldn't have been denying this. Here's the story. Here are the problems. And you better wake up. And the problem is we've already started to legalize it all over, and you've got all these companies getting ready to sell it in the store for any little prescription. I think it's a real problem.
Doc,
I think we're real problem.
In your view, what do you think is worse for the human brain, cocaine or marijuana? Because if I had to roll the dice seeing this and reading this study, I think I'd rather use cocaine because cocaine, keeps you up, gets you excited, and makes you maybe want to trade some stocks and bonds or whatever the Wall Street people do. But it's not going to lead to schizophrenia. Like the idea that marijuana alters your brain chemistry to give you that high where you think, when you're high, you have all these great ideas and you're eating Cheetos and you're on your futon and then, it's messing with your brain chemistry. To me, cocaine over marijuana, what do you think?
Well, I think that cocaine's probably more addictive than the marijuana is. And the difference is that, again, cannabis is, hey, I'm okay, I'm cool, man. It's all about love the one you're with type of thing. So that's really why this is probably not gotten the play that it had. And I don't think that most people that, use this end up with schizophrenia. It might double the risk of psychotic disorder, but anything that's mind-altering can do that. So can cocaine over time can cause some significant psychotic developments as well. The bottom line is not to do either of these things. And if someone's going to do that, do it in the comfort and quiet of your own home and not under any operating machinery or doing anything stupid. And that's probably the best thing we can say at this point.
All right. Moving on, Doc, I want to talk about a woman who has potato roots growing out of her vagina. This is out of the nation of Colombia. A 22-year-old woman inserted a potato into her vagina because her mother said that that was a good way to prevent pregnancy by having a potato in your vagina. Doc, it is an interesting idea. I mean, the potato is a large object. Could that block sperm?
I know this is really funny. How is it going to block sperm? Sperm's tiny, microscopic. You know, the potato would have to block like a cap, like a cervical cap that we normally use for, Well,
Doc, the reason why I ask is there was an old-time contraception device. It was in the TV show Seinfeld, the sponge, right? Women will put a sponge in their vagina, and the idea was that would soak up the sperm. Couldn't a potato do something similar? Maybe a sweet potato.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
But in this case, the potato, because of the pH inside the vagina, apparently she had a very acidic vagina, and the roots started germinating inside her, and then she had roots growing out of her vagina. Is this the first case you've heard of potato roots growing outside a woman's vagina? In
my career, yes, but there's lots of crazy, insane things that people do, and obviously the mother probably really thought it would do a number. I would think that it would probably be great birth control, because if you have a potato in your vagina, how could you have anything else in there, if you understand?
Doc, I think you also touched on to something important, is that if you're a guy and you undress a woman and she has potato roots coming out of her vagina,
what do you think?
I think statistically you probably wouldn't want to have sex with her, thereby preventing pregnancy.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that as the actual way the method this works.
Right. It's like those Native American remedies. Like, have you ever heard pick up a round stone if you have a cramp? Have you ever heard that one?
No.
If you're hiking and you have a cramp, the Native American, it was an old lore that you try to find, when you're hiking, you try to find a round stone. And if you could find a round stone, that would solve your cramping. And it had nothing to do with the round stone. What it has to do with is the process of finding a round stone makes you slow down, it makes you bend over, it takes your mind off the cramping. And by slowing down, bending over, and taking your mind off it, it's the journey, not the destination. So on your way to finding the round stone, the cramp will go away because you're solving the problem by, looking for the round stone, but it's not the actual round stone.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So the potato root vagina trick may actually work and keep her celibate. Doc, let's talk about penis transplants. Now, Rarely does sound engineer Dave add an article into the medical segment because, with one could call a limited IQ, sometimes he can't get his mind around medical stories. This one hit home for him because this is what he thinks could be an important part of his future. This has to do with penile transplants. This could become a reality in the future, according to a new study from the Wake Forest School of Medicine. They're calling these biopenises. Doc, what are you dealing with here?
What you're dealing with is the beginning of cellular medicine, like I always talk about, and the capability of taking cells and developing it into organs. And they're saying it's about 5 years away. It's probably even more than that. I mean, this is not an easy thing. It's an intricate organ, the penis. It has to have the architecture that allows for blood flow in fat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's exactly what they do. They'll make a scaffold of a certain material, and usually it's a bioscaffold. They'll put the material like cells of the penis. It will grow under the right conditions in culture medium situations, and then the scaffold typically either by itself comes apart and disappears just by its own, or it's removed and it allows this new functioning, hopefully, organ to be able to be transplanted.
Okay. And then Dave handed me a question off air. He was wondering, does this have anything to do with penile enlargement, or is this a transplant, like let's say your girlfriend cuts off your member, this is a way to replace it?
No, please tell the engineer that in his case, as we have discussed many times, you and I on air, it would require an electron microscopy to be able to do his.
Oh, right. Well said, Doc. Now, just a quick question. If, let's say, the Lorena Bobbitt case, she cuts off her husband's penis and throws it into a field, what happens? How do currently, in current day medicine, how do they make fake penises these days? Like, what technology do they use to create that?
I don't know. Though they could use a fat from a certain part of the body with some cartilage and create it, but it's not necessarily functional like what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. Now, if they found the penis, they can actually sometimes reattach if it's not been too long and there hasn't been death of the cell. Sometimes the body will be able to find and reconnect the blood supply and nervous supply. It's a catch as catch can at this point.
Okay. Doc, just a couple more, and I want to get into bad dreams. So This is a story of a man in his late 50s, never had nightmares, and then all of a sudden he's having nightmares every night. And what doctors have come to realize is that there's a linkage between individuals who are having nightmares later in life who never had them before and then the onset of Parkinson's disease. So if all of a sudden you're having these horrible dreams, it could be a telltale sign that Parkinson's may be right around the corner. What do you think about this?
Yeah, by the way, it's not just the dream that they're concerned about, because normally during REM sleep, your body's sort of paralyzed. You just have the dream. You're not moving around. Your eyes are moving quickly, but you're not acting out the dream. What they found is that in this case, these people are getting out of bed. They're screaming. They're actually be able to get through the body's normal capability of keeping this part of the dream state quiet. And so it makes sense because the substantia nigra, which is the part of the brain that's affected in Parkinson, and by the way, this article doesn't say it, but it's often for people that have been highly exposed to pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, things of this nature, then it becomes an issue. It would probably be a good idea that people are experiencing this to begin thinking quickly of how to detoxify their body. Okay. And the other thing they saw, which I thought was good, that the nighttime hormone, melatonin, seems to help with it as well.
All right, Doc. This one is about the human sense of smell. According to a new study from the University of Chicago, if you've lost your sense of smell when it comes to smelling things like peppermint or fish or shoe leather, then you're much more likely to die within 5 years. That losing your sense of smell is directly tied to you, potentially about to die of something within the next 5 years. Tell us about the loss of smell, and that's a warning signal that you're about to drop dead.
Well, first of all, you should be aware that the sense of smell is a primitive portion of the brain, and it is easily hit first, and it's hit in many different areas. Some non-mentioned in the article, for example, we know that people that have lost a sense of smell and can't smell like cinnamon any longer, as well as bananas, have 3.6 times the amount of Parkinson's, which ties to the other article. We know that women, after they lose their estrogen postmenopausal, they too do not have as good sense of smell. So now they're saying, and by the way, they also have a smell test for Alzheimer's. That's probably one of the best tests early on to tell. Now they're saying this peppermint, fish, rose, leather is a real serious issue, because now they're saying your odds of dying in the next 5 years, according to the University of Chicago researchers, is greater than most diseases, including cancer and heart disease, except for maybe liver disease. So this is, again, just a underscoring of what we already knew. Loss of sense of smell is a serious issue, unless, of course, and it could be related to other things like, lack of zinc, the mineral. It certainly could be a cold, obviously allergy, long-standing. But when it's truly not related to those things, something is going wrong. You need to seek out a physician. And it does increase your risk of death, much more significantly than anything else.
Huh. What an interesting sign that you're about to die, losing your sense of smell.
Yeah.
Okay, Doc, a final story for you, and this may hit home with you, and this is according to new research out of France, but I don't know if I trust anything out of France, but this one is an interesting story about who patients trust more. Do patients trust male doctors or female doctors more? And it turns out that patients are much more likely to take advice from female physicians. Doc, I tend to agree with this, actually. Women we know are smarter than men. What do you have here? Are you surprised by this?
No, I'm not. I'm not surprised at it. But I also think that there is a good lesson to be taken. I think that, by the way, on both sides, there are physicians, male and female, that can do the same. But female physicians are typically more compassionate. They have more of a mothering nature to them when it comes to individuals. They therefore, our patients would be more likely to take advice from the doctor of the same gender, which they thought of before, but men will also listen to a female. Men are not at ease telling a female about certain problems like sexual problems and things of that nature typically, but in general about weight and things and physical activity, maybe some nutritional issues. They'll listen to a female, one, because men like to please the woman, and number two, the women are tending to be more understanding, more patient, and listen better.
Got it. So probably a trust factor, and that female doctors spend more time and show more compassion, and then that resonates with the patient to follow the advice.
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense. All right, Doc. Well, I am always grateful. What an interesting segment. A lot going on with this Ebola stuff, so we'll keep our eye on it. Doc, before I let you go, though, Ebola, a month from now, is it much, much worse, or is this one of those things where it's in the news cycle because there are one or two patients coming to the U.S., and, this is going to be a horrible thing in West Africa, but you envision the United States being free and clear of this, or do you envision a month or 2 months from now that there are going to be more and more outbreaks of Ebola?
I think you're going to see more and more outbreaks. It's swept through 3 countries. We have 7,500 cases already. 3,500 have already died, 3,500. They're talking about more than 1 million cases through Africa prior to the change of the 2014 to 2015 year. And I will be pleasantly surprised if it's contained. In the past it has, when it's only in one area. Like if it's one area of a specific country, it does its dastardly deed and finishes. But we're so transient of a population, things are moving. Case in point is the fellow that's in the Dallas hospital currently. So we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully. Maybe we're in for here comes the vaccine at a multi-billion-dollar type of thing, and everyone will be rushing for the vaccine. We'll have to wait and see.
And, Doc, what if it mutates and becomes airborne? Do you ever worry about that? Like if Ebola if it changes its form, and then you can get it on a cough, from somebody coughing near you, and then we're all toast, right?
Yeah, well, what makes you think it's not already airborne? How do you think a virus so small that's in vaginal secretions, it's in semen, it's in vomit, it's in everything. How is it possible that all these other viruses that you cough or sneeze, and sneezes, of course, could go up to 35 miles or more an hour, up to 35 to 50 feet. How could you think that these viruses don't hitch a ride on that stuff now?
Yeah.
I'm not buying it. I don't buy it.
All right,
I think
Doc.
it's there.
Well, I'm always grateful. For more information, or if you have a medical question, Dr. Mitch will answer it. You just visit his website, drmitchshow.com. That's DR Mitch Show, so drmitchshow.com. Doc, I appreciate your time, sir. You be well, my friend.
My pleasure. You too. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.